4 years ago, I was a 20-year-old kid with a dream to build a Honda CB750 into a cafe racer. Little did I know that dream would build one of the best communities and one of the most popular CBs ever built, formerly known as the clubsport CB750. More importantly, it taught me the power of persistence, relentlessness, community, and how the culmination of certain values is the differentiating factor in seemingly impossible ideas becoming reality. That is when I became hooked on the craft and decided that building custom motorcycles will be forever part of my life. I have now built 2 custom cafe racers, and now it is time to remaster the one that won everyone's heart. Only this time, we will be taking the entire build to the next level. Follow along to witness every step along the journey of developing and building the Clubsport 2.0.
We're rocking and rolling, fam. Today's episode is going to be all about electrical tray, design, philosophy, process, how to go from empty electrical area space on your cafe racer or any vintage motorcycle build, or really any motorcycle build for that matter, that you're doing somewhat custom and you're going to rework some of the electrical underneath the seat and rear hump. But effectively, we're going to go through and show you the entire process on how to go from empty to a well thought out, purpose-built electrical tray that I think will help bring you guys clarity. We'll do a little bit before and after. We'll do a little time lapse of it. We'll also bring a little clarity as to thought process behind what I'm doing and why. So it's going to be a pretty dynamic episode. We're going to go through it all and just kind of have fun with it, and if hopefully answer any questions that have been outstanding in any of your minds that are about to either embark on a journey like this or have always just been simply curious about how people hide a battery, that's this big underneath here and, open up the entire center section of your cafe build. Because that's a big part of the lines of a cafe racer is not only having straight lines from tip to tail, but also clearing out the center section, which is a huge part of the fundamentals of a cafe racer. First things first, before you get into anything electrical tray, go buy yourself some of this thick, like craft paper from Walmart, under $1. Use this before you get into anything metal related. Why? Well, because you're able to make mock-ups of your template. You're able to create your template, essentially, for no cost, 0 cost. Like, we're talking under $3 cost to create your template that you are fully ready to use and are comfortable with. Meaning, I made this, I mocked it up, didn't fit. Now, I take this and I go back to the drawing board, remake it to the proper fitment, and then keep moving forward. This is a very crucial piece to the puzzle, and I highly encourage all of you, I don't know why you wouldn't, honestly, go buy poster board paper to build your electrical tray. We'll leave it at that. And now, obviously, I'm not going to walk you through how to measure, how to go through it. You can figure that out, and you can reference multiple videos on the internet on how to do that, because using paper is not an uncommon thing in this space of what we're talking about. And so I'm just going to throw us on the time lapse and go through, and I'm going to come off the time lapse once we have a design and we're in a place where we feel comfortable, and that's it. So without further ado, let's cue up the music and get right into making this electrical tray and get it mocked up on the bike. Let's go. with, pretty dialed in, okay? And yes, there is a space right there. However, I'm gonna put a little horizontal, 1 inch, whatever the dimensions end up being once it's cut in metal. I'm gonna cut another piece of paper to fit the gap, translate to metal, and then create a little bar here. And this is gonna serve a purpose of one of two things. A, ventilation. B, potentially a spot for another brake light to be, a little unique. And 3, because I need the depth and space for the M unit, starter solenoid, things like that. So you can see how it drops down about 1 inch, pretty clean. I don't know if I love this, but we will, we'll figure it out later. Essentially, I have to make this step down because if I don't, then it won't be flush to this area. See that? And I don't want to bring this on the bend of the frame rail because then it's kind of a wasted space down there. It doesn't really make any sense. If you have a slope that goes down, pretty much a useless negative space. So instead of wasting that, we're just gonna make a step down, a 90-degree step down. The battery's gonna live here. The cowl will be hollowed out enough or have a battery, cut out of the cowl to fit, like a negative space, I mean. And then we'll have probably M unit here somewhere, starter solenoid, probably mounted diagonally there or something of that nature. And then we'll have the regulator rectifier, somewhere in here. But basically everything that we need to be housed in this electrical tray should be good to go. Now it's gonna be time to translate to metal. Here's a little walk around of what we're working with. Not too shabby.
Show who I am. That people locked up on one part of me that they really did not understand. Homage got the vibe, got the vibe, got the vibe, got the vibe.
Took me a minute to bend this electrical tray properly because I have a kink right here, okay? So you can see how it's angled and then it goes flat. So it's angled and then straight. So that angle was preventing me to get a straight bend on my metal brake. So obviously I really couldn't even use the metal brake. So unfortunately I had to use this 3-inch vise and I used a little plate to help bend it, but it didn't work well. Then I also have these metal brake, like hand tool metal brake things. They work decent. I had to just figure it out. And resulting in me having to use a hammer to truly get that creased bend in the corners. And as you guys if you guys didn't know, using a hammer to pin metal, like warps it, I guess. It's a way to manipulate metal. However, there's a huge downfall with it. It's the fact that you get like pinholes, like a bomb field of like pinholes wherever you're hitting. I didn't know how to properly hide those pinholes. I did some research. I called my powder coater. I called around to a few people to confirm that this was a proper solution to creating a clean, smooth surface for coating. And that is the use of JB Weld. So this stuff right here, professional grade, whatever you call it, JB Weld. The reason why I can use the JB Weld on the frame and the electrical tray in particular is because it is able to go into the oven from the powder coat. So if you're to use just straight up normal Bondo, apparently it won't work with powder coat. So you need to use a proper material, a proper filler. And that is the JB Weld usage. So I went ahead, went everywhere on the corners where there was hammer pin holes, filled in, the gaps here, and essentially let it dry overnight for a full 24 hours so I can have a full cure, which will allow me to sand easier. Finally, this is something I have not done on either of my two builds. I have not done it on the 450 and I have not done it on the 750, which both could have used a little bit of JB Weld in certain areas to flatten out certain imperfections through using the angle grinder, through welding, all that stuff. To give you guys a little run through here. Here's the frame. So I had to use a little bit of JB Weld to build up this section, which worked perfectly. There's not much. It looks like there's a lot, but there's not much, and it mostly will be sanded off. And so we'll have a perfectly smooth, flush transition between hoop and frame rail, so that should be fantastic. I filled in some holes where the stock welds were, filled in some gaps on the low, high spots down here. And effectively, we're gonna have to just go around with the orbital sander and with a handheld sander and just touch up in the certain areas. Sand down this JB Weld to a nice, smooth, flat surface so we have a result of perfection when it comes time to coat the powder coat on the frame. And we are safe because this JB Weld apparently, and upon research, is proper for going into an oven and will not give any issues in the future. It looks like there's a ton on there. Yes, I did glob a good amount on. However, I will sand most of it off except where the areas where it needs to be filling. We're really close to being done with the electrical tray. I'm gonna try to get it welded in this video and go from there. So without further ado, I'm gonna hop on the tripod, get back to sanding, cue up the music, and let's keep moving forward. I am in a pretty damn solid state that I am happy about for this electrical tray. We have flat battery tray on the bottom to 1 inch drop or so, 1¼ inch drop into here. So we're gonna have the starter solenoid made fuse from Rival Cycles in the rear, anti-gravity battery, boom, M unit vertical, and then Rick's regulator rectifier horizontal. The wiring all sort of be flowing on this channel here. That's why we have the regulator rectifier pointed with the wires this way. So the wires that go to the stator on the left side of the bike to the left side of the engine can go down through there. And then the black and red wire, which have to feed back to the starter solenoid, will be able to reach there. So it's all gonna flow really well. I made these little 2 channels here that I need to clean up for the wires to route underneath. You can see there, instead of above like I did on the first build, which I made a mistake of. So essentially this bike is a bigger, better, more expensive version than the version 1 Club Sport. So this one was my first build ever. I didn't really know anything. Everything works exactly how it should, better than I ever imagined, but things don't necessarily make sense. So this, the Club Sport V2, is going to be the exact same thing, but make more sense. So this is step 1, the electrical system. If I show you guys underneath here, it is a mess. Nothing makes sense. We have wires flowing this way, up, down. Just not great in terms of serviceability and everything in between. This is what we're working with. You guys saw me having to use a hammer to make all the pin, and the result of using a hammer makes a ton of pinholes. So you can use a particular JB Weld, professional JB Weld, which is susceptible to the oven for powder coat. Won't ruin anything or come off or peel or dent or whatever. Just went in here, filled it in the sides, made it look pretty. No major flat spots or high spots anymore. It is ready to be coated and starting to get things mounted. All right, boys, it is time to give you guys a proper update on the electrical tray. So now, off tripod, this is where things get real. I've had some time since the last clip you just watched to now what you're looking at to really think about the electrical tray and the trajectory of the build. Now, as you guys know, I was always planning on running a something, which is the oil tank delete kit, okay? So what the something does is it attaches to the bottom of the oil pan, the bottom of the engine, and extends it about an inch or 2 inches. All right, now the issue with that is clearance, belly pan, and everything in between. I'm gonna be running a similar pipe, maybe one that's custom, but similar routing sequence and all that stuff. What my issue is, there's only about, it's hard to see in there, but there's only about an inch of space of depth for the oil pan to be lowered before it hits the top of the collector on the 4-into-1 pipe. Then in addition to that, if I were to modify this pipe and lower it to the bottom of the belly pan, which is doable, I only have a half inch of room down. So for me, what makes the Club Sport is the belly pan. It's one of the massive essential parts of the build that makes it so unique and special and likable. The belly pan, the belly pan, the belly pan, the belly pan. So much so, I have developed and designed my own version. Now, that is a quintessential piece to V2. And I don't think it's worth deleting the oil tank to not run the belly pan. So I'm still undecided on truly what I'm going to do. However, to be safe, I have made an adjustment to the electrical tray. As you guys know before, the original design had these cutouts all the way to the forward front, meaning this depth would go all the way forward, therefore resulting in no real space for the oil pan, if I were to run that instead of the something, to have room and actually work. So what I did was I improvised. I shortened it about 3.5 inches and tack welded it up. And this is what we're left with. I think it's the perfect amount of space, room, and style where it's just gonna work. I'm gonna be able to choose versus the something versus the external oil tank from Cognito Moto. Versus before, I was going to corner myself into only being able to run the something. That would have been a massive issue because if installing the something and adjusting the exhaust pipe wasn't gonna end up working, which it still may, it's still on the table, I would have been cornered into having a fully powder-coated frame, an electrical tray, and an electrical tray that effectively wouldn't fit because I would end up having to run the Cognito external oil tank. So if all that makes sense, I hope it does. Basically, there's two options: the something, the external oil tank delete kit, and or the external oil tank. And personally, I like the cleared out view. I was so excited, and I still am so excited to try to make the something work on this build and engine. But at the end of the day, I cannot sacrifice losing the style of the belly pan for a dry sump system versus a wet system. I'll show you guys a little bit of the lay of the land. So here we have the M unit. That's gonna live probably right there. Then we're gonna have the starter solenoid. It's gonna go somewhere around there. Battery there. So battery, starter solenoid, main fuse, M unit. Again, this is all for flow. If you guys wanna take notes on this, please do consider it. It's a good flow. And then this, I made this little bracket here, which uses the pre-existing holes there, and it's gonna mount right there. Super nice, super clean, super sleek. I'm pumped. All right, fellas, so that's gonna wrap it up for the electrical tray video. I know there was a lot packed in here. I changed directions in course a couple times, but I hope you learned the general process that I take on making an electrical tray for your vintage CB. This is also applicable to most vintage Cafe Racer frames, you know, Suzuki's, Kawasaki's, Hondas, whatever. Meaning, like, same process, meaning you can use paper to start. You can have a similar flow of components from the rear to the front. Design philosophy, similar, all the same. So this is specific to a CB750 frame. If you want to exactly copy it, by all means do. I'd be happy for you guys to do that. I'd be flattered. This was a fully packed video. Again, like I said, I changed course a couple times. We have a couple things to contemplate. Are we going to run a Cognito Moto external oil tank, or are we going to go with the original plan with the something? It's really predicated on how my fabrication skills will play out, and if we truly have enough room to make it work. I am undecided yet because I haven't actually been able to mount things up. That's going to be more of a decision made once the engine's back in the frame. Long story short is, regardless of the decision of something or Cognito oil tank, I have made the electrical tray to spec to accommodate both options if I go one route versus the other, and you know, so be it. So basically the safe route. And additionally, this design actually ends up being better than the original design of having this go all the way to the front to here. I'm actually thrilled on how this regulator rectifier mounts off of this bottom piece. It just works. It just really works. The wires are going to be able to flow to their respective areas really well, and it's just going to be good. Like, I'm excited about this electrical tray. It's probably the best one I've made so far. It's not done yet, so this is kind of like, I guess, part one But as far as the frame goes, the frame is pretty damn close to being finished and ready to powder coat. There's a few little areas we need to continue to JB weld and flatten. And if that is something you guys didn't know, if you have imperfections from your angle grinder or sanding, cutting this rear frame stock, welding on the rear hoop, all that stuff, you do create lines that are inconsistent. If you want to fix those, you can use high temp JB weld, and that is good with the powder coat in the oven. So that's what I did. I went ahead and smoothed all the areas. So we're gonna have a perfectly flush frame rail on each aspect of this frame. So that's gonna wrap it up for this video. If you're interested in seeing this bike be built into a version 2, better version of this bike, then consider subscribing. I'd really appreciate it, as it gives me the motivation to continue and teach you guys more and just share the process of building and the things that you and I love to do, and that is ride, watch, build motorcycles and cars. So with that being said, all things automotive, we love it here, especially BMWs, cafe racers, that's like our forte. If you're interested in being part of this journey, consider subscribing. We'd really appreciate it. And as always, fam, thank you for being the dopest crew out there. We're one team, one family, and I'll catch you in the next episode. As you can see, we have the entire engine on this table, and then the cases below the table. And you're gonna see the entire process of taking the engine from the 76 CB750F Super Sport fully apart. We have officially tore down the engine for the Club Sport V2 build.